At 95 years old, Clint Eastwood no longer speaks to impress. He speaks to be honest. After more than 7 decades in Hollywood, after the fame, the awards, the controversies, and the silence, Clint Eastwood finally allows himself to say what he truly thinks, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with a calm clarity that only time can grant. Born as Clinton Eastwood Jr. on May 31st, 1930 in San Francisco, during the depths of the Great Depression, Eastwood's life began in uncertainty. His family moved constantly across California, chasing work wherever it appeared. That restless childhood shaped him early. He learned to depend on himself, to observe more than he spoke, to keep his emotions guarded. As a boy, Clint was quiet, introspective, almost invisible in a noisy world. While others demanded attention, he watched. While others spoke, he listened. Music became his refuge, jazz, piano, rhythm, and restraint. Long before he ever stepped in front of a camera, Eastwood was already learning the power of understatement, a lesson that would later define his entire career. After high school, there was no clear path forward. He worked as a lifeguard, a lumberjack, a gas station attendant, ordinary jobs, hard jobs, jobs that taught him respect for labor and resilience. Acting was not a dream handed to him. It was something he drifted toward slowly, almost accidentally, after being discharged from the U.S. Army and trying his luck in Hollywood. What followed were years of rejection. Universal Pictures signed him in the mid-1950s, then quietly let him go. Executives criticized his looks, his voice, his lack of charisma. To them, he didn't fit the mold. To Clint Eastwood, those failures became armor. He studied, he waited, he endured. This patience would later separate him from almost everyone else, and it would eventually place him in direct contrast with a Hollywood that no longer valued silence, nuance, or doubt. At 95, when Clint Eastwood finally speaks about Rob Reiner, he is not settling a score. He is revealing a fracture, not between two men, but between two philosophies of storytelling, one that asks questions and one that insists on answers. And this truth, quietly spoken, carries more weight than any accusation ever could. By the late 1950s, Clint Eastwood was still far from a star. He was surviving, not succeeding. Then in 1959, stability finally arrived in the form of a television series called Rawhide. Cast as Rowdy Yates, Eastwood suddenly had steady work, visibility, and a paycheck he could rely on. For 8 seasons, he rode across American living rooms every week, becoming a familiar face to millions. But comfort came with a cost. Though Rawhide gave him recognition, Eastwood felt creatively boxed in. Television demanded repetition, obedience, and predictability. Clint wanted something else. He wanted ambiguity, space, silence. He wanted roles that trusted the audience to lean forward instead of being spoon-fed meaning. Most actors in his position would have clung to security. Clint Eastwood chose risk. In the mid-1960s, he made a decision that baffled his peers and terrified his agents. He left American television at the height of its power to work in Italian cinema with a relatively unknown director named Sergio Leone. The pay was modest. The scripts were unconventional. The future was uncertain. The film was a fistful of dollars, then came for a few dollars more. Then the good, the bad, and the ugly. Together, these films did more than revive the Western genre. They reinvented it. Eastwood's Man with No Name spoke little, moved slowly, and revealed almost nothing of his inner life. Yet with a single stare, he communicated menace, morality, and mystery. This was masculinity stripped of theatrics. No speeches, no explanations, just presence. Audiences around the world responded instantly. The films became global sensations, and Eastwood transformed overnight into an international star. But more importantly, he gained something far more valuable than fame. He gained control over his choices, control over his image, control over his future. Returning to Hollywood in the late 1960s and 1970s, Eastwood was no longer seeking approval. Hollywood was now adapting it to him. With films like Dirty Harry, he embodied a new kind of a screen authority, one that reflected public frustration with crime and moral ambiguity. The character of Harry Callahan ignited fierce debate. Some praised him as a symbol of order, others condemned him as authoritarian. Eastwood rejected both labels. He insisted his characters were never meant to provide answers, only to expose uncomfortable questions. That philosophy would soon define not just his acting, but his work behind the camera. Clint Eastwood was no longer just performing, he was becoming a filmmaker. And the man who once struggled to be heard was now quietly shaping the direction of American cinema. By the early 1970s, Clint Eastwood had achieved what most actors never do. He was powerful enough to stop chasing roles. Instead, he began shaping them. Eastwood's transition from actor to director did not come with loud announcements or grand manifestos. It happened quietly, deliberately. He learned by doing, by watching, by listening. Every film became a classroom. Every set became a place of discipline and restraint. His directorial debut, Play Misty for Me, revealed an unexpected precision. It was controlled, tense, and emotionally economical. Eastwood didn't flood scenes with dialogue. He trusted silence, he trusted faces, he trusted the audience. As his confidence grew, so did his range. Films like High Plains Drifter, The Outlaw, Josie Wales, Every Which Way But Loose, and Escape from Alcatraz showed a filmmaker unafraid of contradiction. Violence existed, but so did regret. Justice was pursued, but never cleanly. Heroes carried shadows, and villains were rarely simple. Behind the camera, Eastwood developed a working style that became legendary. He favored minimal takes, natural lighting, no excessive rehearsals. He believed too much polish killed truth. Actors respected him because he gave them room to breathe. Crews respected him because he wasted nothing. This approach was not about speed. It was about trust. Eastwood trusted his instincts. He trusted his performers, and above all, he trusted the intelligence of the audience. The themes he explored grew heavier with time. Aging, redemption, the weight of past violence, the cost of masculinity. These were not fashionable topics in mainstream cinema, but Eastwood pursued them relentlessly. All of it culminated in 1992 with Unforgiven. The film dismantled the mythology that had once made him famous. It questioned the morality of revenge, the glorification of killing, and the lies men tell themselves to survive their own histories. Unforgiven earned Eastwood Academy Awards for Best Director and Best Picture, sealing his transformation from movie star to master filmmaker. From that moment on, his voice carried authority, not because it was loud, but because it was earned. What followed was an extraordinary creative run. Mystic River, $1 Million Baby, Letters from Iwo Jima, Changeling, Gran Torino, American Sniper. Each film confronted uncomfortable truths. Each refused easy conclusions. While Hollywood around him began leaning toward a certainty and a spectacle, Clint Eastwood doubled down on ambiguity, and in doing so, he set himself apart from a new generation of filmmakers who believed cinema should instruct rather than explore. This philosophical divide would eventually surface not on screen but in words, and one name would come to symbolize it: Rob Reiner. By the turn of the new millennium, Clint Eastwood was no longer simply an American icon. He had become a global institution. His influence reached far beyond Hollywood. Europe, in particular, embraced him not just as a movie star, but as a serious artist. France, a nation famously demanding in its reverence for cinema, honored Eastwood repeatedly. In 1994, he was named a commander of the Ordre des Arts et des Lettres, recognizing his profound contribution to culture. In 2007, France bestowed upon him the Legion of Honor, its highest civilian distinction. These were not ceremonial gestures. They reflected genuine respect for a filmmaker who treated cinema as moral inquiry rather than ideological performance. In 2000, the Venice Film Festival awarded Eastwood the Golden Lion for Lifetime Achievement. It was one of the most prestigious honors in international film, celebrating not a single success, but an entire body of work marked by restraint, discipline, and philosophical depth. Back home, the American Film Institute presented him with its Life Achievement Award, placing him among a rare group of artists whose work reshaped the identity of American cinema itself. Yet while the world celebrated Clint Eastwood the artist, his private life told a quieter, more complicated story. His longest and most defining relationship was with Margaret Maggie Johnson. They met in 1953, long before fame, when Eastwood was still struggling, uncertain, and largely invisible. Maggie offered stability at a time when his future seemed fragile. They married that same year, beginning a union that would last over 3 decades. During the early years, money was tight. Rejection was frequent. Maggie stood beside him through those disappointments, providing emotional grounding while he chased an elusive dream. When Rawhide and later international stardom arrived, everything changed. Fame brought opportunity, but it also brought distance. Eastwood's relentless work schedule and growing independence reshaped their marriage. Maggie remained largely outside the Hollywood spotlight, choosing privacy and a domestic life far removed from the industry's chaos. Their relationship endured long separations and well-documented infidelities, which Eastwood would later acknowledge with unusual candor. Despite these fractures, they remained legally married for decades, bound by history, responsibility, and shared children. They raised 2 children together: Kyle Eastwood, who would become a respected jazz musician, and Allison Eastwood, who pursued acting and filmmaking. Maggie prioritized family continuity, protecting her children from the excesses of Hollywood life. In 1978, after 25 years of marriage, Clint and Maggie formally separated. Their divorce would not be finalized until 1984, one of the most expensive settlements in Hollywood at the time. The delay reflected just how intertwined their lives had become. Maggie Johnson was there before the fame, endured the weight of it, and carried its consequences long after the spotlight moved on. At 95, Clint Eastwood understands this cost. Success gave him freedom, but it demanded sacrifice. And that awareness shaped the way he would later speak about legacy, truth, and the changing soul of Hollywood itself. Because the final chapter of his story is not about films, it is about honesty. At 95, Clint Eastwood no longer feels the need to defend himself. He has nothing left to prove. Looking back on more than 70 years in Hollywood, Eastwood speaks with a calm that unsettles people more than outrage ever could. When asked about Rob Reiner, his tone is measured, almost gentle. There's no bitterness in his voice, no desire to attack. "I've never had a problem with Rob as a filmmaker," Eastwood says. "He's talented. You don't make the movies he's made without understanding character and timing." Eastwood openly acknowledges Reiner's early work, films rooted in warmth, humor, and human connection. To him, those movies represented a different Hollywood, a place where storytelling mattered more than signaling, where curiosity mattered more than certainty. But something in Eastwood's eyes changed. Somewhere along the line, he reflects, the business stopped being about curiosity. It became about certainty. And certainty is dangerous in art. This, he explains, is not about politics. It is about philosophy. Eastwood believes storytelling should ask questions, not deliver verdicts. His films were never meant to tell audiences what to think. They were meant to show people who they are. Whether exploring war, violence, aging, or regret, he trusted viewers to draw their own conclusions. That trust, he feels, is disappearing. To Eastwood, Rob Reiner has become symbolic of a Hollywood culture that no longer tolerates disagreement, a culture where moral conviction slowly transforms into moral superiority, where artists speak louder but listen less. "Rob wants to win arguments," Eastwood says quietly. "I want to ask questions." He recalls a time when filmmakers with opposing worldviews worked side by side, united by craft rather than ideology. Disagreement was not treated as betrayal. It was fuel for better stories. Today, he believes that spirit has eroded. Now, Eastwood says, disagreement is treated like a moral failure. He is careful not to cast himself as a victim. "Nobody's silencing me," he says. "I've had my say." What truly concerns him is the younger generation of filmmakers, artists who feel pressure to align with approved opinions, creators who are afraid to be honest. They're scared, he says, and fear has never made good art. When asked whether Rob Reiner understands this criticism, Eastwood pauses. "I don't know," he admits. "People hear what they want to hear." His words are not meant as an attack. They are a reflection, a warning, a lament for an industry that once welcomed outsiders and now rewards conformity. At 95, Clint Eastwood is not angry. He is saddened. At 95 years old, Clint Eastwood has no interest in settling scores. "Life's too short for grudges," he says. What matters to him now is not box office numbers, not awards, not applause. What matters is freedom. The freedom to tell stories honestly, even when they make people uncomfortable. "I'd rather make a movie that challenges people," Eastwood reflects, "than one that tells them they're perfect." His truth about Rob Reiner is not a revelation. It is not a scandal. It is a quiet lament. The sorrow of an artist watching an industry trade curiosity for conformity, listening less, declaring more, asking fewer questions. Hollywood, Eastwood remembers, used to be a place where outsiders belonged, a place where disagreement sharpened ideas instead of silencing them, where the stories united rather than divided. Now, he says softly, everyone's trying to prove they're on the inside. Clint Eastwood's legacy is not built on certainty. It is built on restraint, on trust, on the belief that audiences are intelligent enough to think for themselves. His films endure not because they tell us what is right, but because they force us to confront what is complicated. As the final chapter of his life unfolds, Eastwood stands exactly where he always has. Not above the audience, not in front of them, but beside them, watching, asking, and refusing to shout. Because in the end, the most powerful truth is not the one spoken the loudest, it is the one spoken last.